I recently got a question about how to implement camera movement that's controlled through on-screen controls. So I wanted to show you a quick example I put together that shows one approach to accomplishing this. Let's take a look at how it functions. So we have these on-screen controls which let us move, turn, and move in the direction we're turned. So very straightforward, common sort of navigation behavior. The first thing to note is that I've nested the default camera under an empty entity that I called player. The reason I did this is so the camera can remain pointed down a little bit, but then the player node which it's nested in can move straight forward, straight back on sort of a horizontal plane. Another thing to note is that I've removed all camera scripts, so there are no scripts on the camera in this version. I chose to implement this through state machines, so I'll select the player and let's look at the state machine that is attached to that. So the state machine starts out in the await button event state. Here we're using listen actions to listen for some custom events indicating which buttons are pressed. So when the forward button down event occurs, it transitions to the move forward state. Here, we're using a move action to move -1 meter per second on the Z direction, which is forward. And these are the default options, oriented, relative, and on every frame. You want to keep those enabled. Those are the correct options to have. After the move action is this listen action, which is going to, in this case, listen for the forward button up event, indicating that the user is no longer touching the forward button. So where do these events actually get emitted from? I've implemented the controls via a single HTML entity. I really like using HTML entities for 2D user interface controls that need to remain stationary on the screen. We have a tutorial article about positioning static HTML elements. I highly recommend you read that in order to understand how to create this type of user interface. But let's go ahead and open up that HTML document so that I can show you how the events are emitted. I find this to be a very handy approach for emitting events from HTML user interface elements. So I just assign an on-touch start handler, on-touch end, on-mouse down, and on-mouse up that just use the Sumerian system bus to emit the events that I want. And that's all the detail you need for this implementation.